Hello there, welcome to another video in the Studying English at Aston How-To series. My name is Dr. Robbie Love, and in this video I'll be talking to you about how to cite sources in your academic writing. It's really important to cite the material that you refer to in your work as part of your academic writing, as this shows the reader which sources you've used and also acknowledges the people whose ideas you've been using in your work. And so it's very important to cite all of the sources that you use so that you avoid the potential for plagiarism as well. So what should you cite in your academic writing? Any material that you borrow from another author in your writing, regardless of whether you quote it directly or not. So we're not just talking about when you actually produce a direct quotation of somebody else's work. This is even when you discuss ideas or theories in general, even if you're not quoting directly, or if you paraphrase someone else's ideas. These are also examples of a situation where you're expected to cite the work. And so for us in English, the sorts of materials that we're typically citing include academic books, edited academic books, chapters from edited academic books, academic journal articles, and online materials, which may be academic or non-academic depending on the context. And I'll talk about that a little bit later on in this video and also in the other video that I'm doing, which is about producing the references list. There are other types of sources that you may use, which I won't talk about here. However, there's a full guide for how to cite all sorts of different sources available in Blackboard. In English, at Aston, we use what's known as the Harvard style for citation. Harvard is one of many different systems for citing academic sources, and it's one of the most common ones around the world. And the full style guide is available for you in Blackboard in the school information site that you will have been added to. So there are two main components to citing sources. One of them, which I'm talking about in this video, is the in-text citation. So that's when you're actually in your essay and you're writing and you mention a source. The other component, which I'll talk about in my next video, is the list of references, which is the list that comes typically right at the end of the essay, where you list the full information of the sources that you've cited. And something which comes up quite often with students is the question of the use of footnotes or endnotes. These are not used in English at Aston for citing sources. You can use footnotes in other ways if you wish, but not for citation. So, when we're in the middle of our essay and we want to cite a source, what do we need to include? Well, there are three core pieces of information that should be included. One is the surname or surnames of the author or authors. So here's a few examples here. Obviously, if it's just one author, then that's simple. You just put their surname. If it's two authors, you simply list them in the order that they come in the publication. So there's an example there, Love and Curry. Now, if you have more than two authors, which does happen sometimes, rather than listing the surname of all of the authors, you use this little Latin phrase, which is very handy, called et al. And that translates directly to and all. It's just a shorthand way of avoiding listing a long list of names and save space on the page. And so the general convention is that if you have more than two authors, then you would say et al. After the first author's surname. The second piece of core information is the year that the source was published. So that's simple enough, for example, 2020. Now, the third piece of information is not always needed. So sometimes you just have the surname of the author and the year of publication, and that's it. However, sometimes you also need to add the page number or numbers. If you are referring to a specific point that is made in the source. So that may be that you're quoting that source directly. Obviously, that's a specific point. In which case, in addition to the names and the year, you also have to say which page in that source is that quote. But you may also be referring to a specific point that the author makes without actually quoting them directly. That's in terms of the way that you present this, it's exactly the same. You give the surname, the year, and the page. So how do we actually format this when we're writing? How does it look on the page? Well, the typical format, if you're actually mentioning the source explicitly, if it is grammatically part of the sentence that you're writing, then you would have the surname or surnames mentioned as part of the writing, and then the year, and if you have page numbers as well, those elements would be in parentheses. So, for example, if you're referring to a specific point, then you might see something like this. However, Love claimed that this was not true. So you're talking about this author Love, and you're referring to a specific point that they've made. You're not actually quoting them directly, but you're referring to a specific point they've made, which is identifiable on a specific page of the source. And so you have Love, which is actually the subject of the sentence, that is part of the sentence, you're referring to them. And then in brackets you have the year and the page. Love 2020, page 45. And you can see that's indicated in brackets. You have the year first and then a comma, and then P, and then the number of the page. Now, if you are quoting them directly, it's pretty much exactly the same. So here's an example. According to McHenry and Wright, 2017, page 5, and then the quote, the sky is blue. And I should mention also that all of these sources are completely made up, by the way, so don't go searching for these. They're made up. So that's when you are referring to a specific point. If you're not referring to a specific point, but you're just generally mentioning the source, then it's much the same, apart from you don't include the page number, because you're referring to the entire thing, usually the entire book or article. And here's a couple of examples where that might happen. Scholars such as Harrison, 1999, have since adopted this approach, or Leach et al., 2008, introduced a new theory. When you're talking about something broad and general that source has provided, then you can't really focus on a specific page. You're actually referring to the entire thing, and that's okay. So the minimum information that you need is the name and the year. In addition, if you're referring to a specific point, you need the page. Similarly, you need the same information if you are referring to the source, but without actually mentioning it sort of explicitly as part of the sentence. And some examples will demonstrate this for you. Again, you can make a specific point without actually mentioning the source directly in the sentence. So, for example, you might say something like, "It is known that the sun rises in the east." You're not actually explicitly saying, Phillips said that the sun rises in the east. You're just claiming that fact, and then in the brackets you have everything. You have the name, and then the year, and then the page. Likewise, you can do this with quotes. It has been described as a challenging task, and then you have the surname, the year, and the page. Likewise, you can refer to the source overall, so not a specific page, without incorporating them grammatically into the sentence. So you might have a list of sources which all kind of agree on the same point, or have all said a similar thing, and it's common to list a few examples to show that you've read them. So here's an example here. This is a well-known problem in the field, and then you have a list there of 3 sources which you're claiming are all saying more or less the same thing. And again, you're not actually saying grammatically in the sentence the source, but you're indicating in the parentheses that you have read them. If you need to quote something that is longer than 2 lines directly, then this is what you do. You would introduce the quote with a sentence, and then you'd indent the quote, and then put the citation information immediately below. And so there's an example here where Baker 2020 is talking about cats, and you have decided that you want to include the entire quote verbatim. It's quite long, and so you indent it on a new line and present it. And interestingly, you'll notice it's not in speech marks, it's not in quotation marks. Okay, there is a lot more detail. These are kind of the basics. If you learn these sort of practices, then you'll be well on your way to doing a great job of citation. There's a lot more detail in the information available on Blackboard. And obviously, if you have any questions, then please do contact me or another member of staff at any point, because it's really important that you get the hang of this as soon as you possibly can. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.